Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode of Top Billers Toolkit, where me and my twin brother interview top billers from all around the globe to unlock the secrets to their success. Today's guest is Tony Teshara. Now, Tony is $1 million biller, but here's where it gets really interesting. 50% of Tony's entire revenue comes from a very attractive referral partnership scheme that he has mastered and continues to market. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of referral partnership schemes. It's nothing new. However, very few recruiters can pull them off effectively, let alone generate hundreds of thousands in revenue. In today's episode, Tony's going to be sharing Tony's exact process of how he goes about creating a very successful and lucrative referral partnership system, how Tony creates content that gets him consistent inbound leads, and finally, Tony's going to be giving us some tips around how he's managed to bill so consistently at such a high level. This one is packed with insights that you're not going to want to miss, guys. And as usual, grab a cuppa or a glass of wine, depending on when you listen to this, and let's get into it, shall we? Cool. Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. I am really looking forward to this podcast. I have to say, your story and your thinking is very unique, in my opinion. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for waking up so early as well.
No, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually always up early. I've got kids, right? So, I mean, 5 a.m. is often, normal time for me. So this is nothing.
Cool. I don't know what it is. It might be a bit of a generalization, but I feel like when I speak to anyone in the US, US are early risers. Pretty much every single US client I've had always wake up at the crack of dawn. And I don't know. Do you find that to be the case? Am I dreaming here, or?
Yeah, I do a lot of meetings early morning and actually late at night as well. So it's just like us Americans, we're bad at like forming boundaries, I think. So like,
I think it's just an incredible work ethic, isn't it?
I don't know that, or it's just bad time management.
Cool. Well, let's jump on to the first question, if that's okay with you, Tony. We always ask every single guest this question, and it's, what's the number one tool in your toolkit, whether it be a mindset, strategy, or software?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would say for me, it really is a blending of everything, but I do think it starts with a mindset, with the idea of like, when I go in to talk to a potential prospect or, a client that needs help, or even a candidate, I really go in it with a mindset of like, I want to genuinely help these people, right? I don't look at it from like, I'm going to try to close this business and make money off of them. Really, it's about, hey, how do I dig deeper, find out what you're really trying to solve? And then that helps me do a better job for them. And what happens as a result? We close more business, right? So it creates more trust and authenticity. And that's really been able to help me. So I guess it's kind of a blending of like, hey, a mindset and a strategy of like, hey, I'm consultative. I can't tell you what you need as a client until you actually tell me what you need and we can discuss it, right? So my perspective in recruiting is that hiring is not necessarily the goal of a company, right? Every organization, whether you're an early stage startup or you're mature in, your org, is that you have some sort of objective that you're trying to solve, right? Maybe it's a product launch, maybe it's a rebrand, something like that. Hiring is just the byproduct of trying to get that done. And so really the way I approach it is, okay, well, if we don't get this hire in place for you, what does that mean for your business? And we kind of reverse engineer it back that way. And what I found has been successful with that is that it gets more buy-in, because then they realize as well, this is bigger than just a hire. We're either going to hit our goals or not. So that's how I really kind of have that mindset and strategy in approaching things, and then from a tooling standpoint, right? Anything that I can do to automate my processes, the mundane processes, to make things move much faster. So whether that is using, tools like SendSpark to do video outreach, Dripify to automate things, a lot of AI tools to go through my candidate database, that's helped me be more efficient and spend more time with my clients and candidates.
Awesome. Great responses.
If there
Yeah,
was
go ahead,
one
Sam.
tool that you found the most useful out of interest, Tony, what would it be? What one that you would be like, yes, this is the one that saved me the most time?
Yeah, well, I will tell you this right now. I'm a big fan of SynSpark. So shout out to Bethany and team right now. Like video prospecting has kind of been a huge game changer because we all get hit up in our inboxes all the time with like, hey, we offer this service, RPO, staffing and recruiting. I'm like, you don't even look at me. I'm a recruiter as well, right? So when I use video prospecting, I can put my face, whether that's a good thing or not, right? Depends on who you ask. You want to look at this, but it does give me a chance to kind of stand out and create a human to human interaction. So huge game changer. And I do recommend anybody, whether it's recruiting or standard sales, account management, start embracing more video type software.
Awesome. What is it called? SemSpark?
SendSpark, yeah.
SendSpark.
Yeah. Great product.
And what does it do that's different? Because it sounds like it does it at volume. What does it do that's different to just sending a normal video?
Yeah, so it automates at scale, right? So literally I can create it in there. And when I put a campaign in there, the AI is going to look at the name and the company of who I'm prospecting, and it's going to mimic my voice and automatically drop it in scale. So there becomes a level of personalization.
That's awesome. That's really clever.
Incredible.
I've used that before via email. So not that product, but something similar. And is that via email or via LinkedIn or both?
Both.
Oh,
yeah.
Brilliant.
That's and it's awesome too, because I can literally be in LinkedIn Messenger and I can go, oh, there's Ben. Let me just send him a quick message. Literally, I can click it with the Chrome extension, record it, drop it right in there. And then I can, and there's tracking. I can see who opened it.
Oh, brilliant. Wow.
I can go back and follow, right? So it's a very inexpensive tool. So,
interesting.
Bethany, if you're listening, I'm ready for my free
20%.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's already a massive golden nugget for other people, which is cool. And I have to say, I wasn't planning on bringing this into the podcast, Tony, but then I looked at your profile. I just looked at your post and I saw a post that stood out to me. And it was really very vulnerable, very honest. And it looked like a life-changing point in your life where you were working 70 hours a week. It sounded like you were in hospital and just in a really bad way. And I feel like we should talk about that if you're open and willing, because it sounds like a really important moment in your life that shifted things. Do you mind talking to us what happened and how you got there?
Yeah, and I'm a pretty open book on, LinkedIn. I think that, beyond just a branding perspective, but just a community perspective, I think it's important to present yourself holistically, right? Beyond the professional realm, because I think it buys credibility. And, one of my old sayings is, if they buy you, they buy from you. So I think it's just bringing out that level of authenticity. But yeah, I mean, about 2 years ago, I co-founded an AI-based startup, and we were grinding away hours. I was still working at Handle as my day job, and then I was like building this at night. And then we talked about those boundaries. I would be working from 6 a.m. to like 10 p.m. just nonstop.
Wow.
Didn't get to see my kids as much as I wanted. And then just, when you're working a lot, right? Just like everything goes out the window, right? Like your diet, your exercise, your well-being. And it was deteriorating really fast. And then in September, about a year ago, I ended up catching an infection on a hike with my kids. Ended up in the hospital for 3 days in the ER on like IV antibiotics. And that really gave me some time to kind of take stock on, what was important for me. And I ultimately made the decision. It was a hard decision, like to walk away from, the startup that I co-founded, and just focus primarily on recruiting, just because really it's been my first love. And I really do love working with candidates and clients. And so as I do things forward, I really kind of try to lead more of an intentional life. And what that means for me is I really want to be more discerning on the clients that I work with, the candidates that I represent, and just the people that I help. So when I do things for people, I do it without asking for anything in return. When I work with clients, I want to make sure that they meet my value system. I've fired clients because, either they didn't align with how I felt the hiring process should go. Going 3-4 weeks between interview cycles is just not productive for anyone. And so I really try to be more intentional on the things I do, and I share my story, my wisdom, and my mistakes. And there's a lot of mistakes that I make still to this day. And I think that just creates me to be more authentic, hopefully. And you don't have to like me, right? I'm not for everyone, but at least I'll stand out from the pack a little bit in the sea of recruiters.
Yeah, I love that. I can't stress enough, and I'm sure everyone feels the same way, about how important it is to have the right clients. I feel like it makes such a big difference to your life and your working environment. Like, it's unbelievable. Me and Sam have been through this. And, when you have the wrong client, you could have 9 really good clients and 1 horrifically bad client, and it can completely change how you feel about work. For me anyway, like, I'll wake up thinking about that client in the shower when I have a bad client, and I'll go to bed thinking about that client. And it's just like, the amount of mental energy it takes is unbelievable. So I love that you've, put some really strict boundaries around working with clients that align with your values. I think if every recruiter did that, they would be a lot happier.
And it's hard too. And it's hard because, we're in a tough economy. And when there's opportunities to make money for, your business and your family, it's tempting, right? And so it's discipline that I've had to create for myself, and to ask myself, is this a client I truly want to work with? Is this a company that I feel comfortable presenting candidates to? Because again, like, this is my brand and my reputation, and that's more important to me than any like immediate revenue that might come in.
I just want to go back to mistakes as well, because I feel like you spend a day scrolling through LinkedIn and everyone's won the lottery, everyone's won an award, everyone's making 50 grand a month. And it's like just filled with positivity, almost to not a toxic sense. I hate using that word, but just endless positivity. And I think there's such a gap in the market for people just sharing mistakes. So I think that's really, and I follow a chap called Yasin, who kind of, he's building an online business, and he's like a video guru, and he shares a lot of his mistakes, and it brings me so much closer to him. It's insane when he shares his mistakes. He shares what he's aiming for, make 300K in 30 days. Sometimes he gets it, sometimes he doesn't. But when he doesn't, it really connects me to him. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think anybody, if you're building a business, whether it's recruiting or a product or any sort of services, and I think if you can involve your user base and your audience along the ride for your journey, and just, like, hey, we're testing some features out, right? I think you're going to get more buy-in. So literally, as you go to market, you've got that built-in audience who are cheering for you, right? And they want to go along for the ride with you on, your highs and your lows. And again, I always tell people that, I tell my candidates and I tell other recruiters, we're living in the world of commodity state, right? You could be the most talented candidate in the world. You could be the best recruiter in the world. But guess what? There's a lot of other talented recruiters and candidates out there. So how are you going to stand out against the noise, right? And so that's where you have to figure out, how do I not become a commodity? And I think just, again, putting yourself out there, sharing your journeys, highs, lows, soliciting feedback, just creates a lot of buy-in and community.
Yeah, you said it a lot better than I did, Tony. Thank you. That was perfect.
Yeah.
So I feel like we have to talk about this because it's very impressive. You are £1 million biller. I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, in the pre-call you are on track to hit 1.5 this year, which is amazing. Yeah. How long did it take you to get to that level? Because I love going into the realism of what it takes to get to your level. You're probably in the top 1% or 5%, in the top percentile of recruiters. How long did it take you to get to that level, do you think, Tony, where you were billing $1 million?
Yeah, it took about 2 solid years,
Okay, I thought you were going to say a lot longer than that, actually, Tony.
No, and
that's
like,
actually pretty fast.
But here's the thing, right? A lot of it comes down to, again, relationships. And literally, we got in with a really, really large company who had multiple roles needing to be filled. And then it was just literally relentless high-level service. and just kind of providing, again, like, hey, what's the next thing you're trying to accomplish? How can we help? Right. It was never about how can I help you fill this position? It was like, how can I help? So it was giving a lot of free advice, which is like unsolicited, with the intention of saying, well, I can fill that for you. It was more of just providing advice and just kind of being that constant where whenever they thought of a different role, they thought of Handel and they thought of Tony and his team. And so we started getting into other functions beyond what we were doing, right? So it was just for a while, we were just filling in for developers, but I'm like, yeah, we can help you with your sales team. You need account executives, you need operationals people. So it was really kind of just creating that sense of stickiness. And then from there, it was literally like, hey, is there anybody else who could use our service? It was just a lot of referral based. And then we snowballed it from there. And then, as my model is 50% kind of retained search, 50% staffing. So it almost becomes like a SaaS model where it just, I have this ARR that just continues to compound on itself. So we found a lot of success really quickly. I think I wouldn't call it a mistake, but the learning point that I really kind of learned over the last year and a half is that diversifying is always good. So when you have all your eggs in one client's basket, you're almost at their mercy in the sense of if their revenue goes down or their budget goes down, it's a trickle down effect, right? So just kind of taking what we did successfully and then figure out how do we replicate that. So then that way we're diversified against, any one client who sees a downtick in their revenue.
Interesting. And just so I can understand, so it took you about 2 years to get to 1 million, but prior to that, you've been recruiting for a while. Am I right in saying that, Tony?
Yeah. So I've been recruiting for a number of years, and a lot of that was just, it was up and down, but it's once we started getting more into a staffing model of, working with talent down in Latin America, that was sort of the unlock potential for us. And then it was just like, we haven't looked back.
Interesting. Cool. That's a great response because that brings me on to my next question perfectly, which is most recruiters, we ask a question for most recruiters and we say like, what was the moment at which your billing started to significantly increase or stabilize or improve? And I'm guessing that is the point for you, which things started to stabilize is diversifying and hiring from LATAM. Am I right in saying that, Tony?
Yeah, I would absolutely say so. And I just think what it was a variety of things. One, it was the economy and what they could support for salaries. And then two, the emergence of AI really kind of limited the talent pool in North America, right? So every startup is looking for, to add AI to their product, and they probably should. But the challenge is they need machine learning engineers. They need, data scientists. Well, guess what? Meta and Google and all those companies are paying those people $300,000 to sit on their ass and not do anything. So they just don't go to the competition. Now you're a startup and you're trying to get off the ground and you're trying to build this stuff. Where are you going to find the people to build this product? So really opening up the talent pool and going globally has allowed people to find amazing, talented developers down in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, who cost half the price of what they pay in the US, and they're just as good, right? So the whole idea now with startups is like, hey, your capital's limited, your runway is short, do more for less. And that's sort of been the secret sauce for us as we've grown over the last year and a half, is just really kind of niching down and saying, you need help building your AI product. We've got the talent that can help you do that.
Interesting.
What's been your most successful way of marketing your services to these startups? Has it again been referral, Tony, or has there been other methods?
Yeah, so that's a great question. To be completely honest, we do very, very little direct outreach. like I do employ somebody who helps manage like, traditional email campaigns, and we do cold calling, and we do all the traditional methods. But yeah, a lot of our businesses come either through like LinkedIn, through like thought leadership that we've created and kind of curated, or yeah, referrals. We've got a referral program that's been mighty successful for us. And just that word of mouth of just going back like, hey, is there anybody that you think could benefit from our types of services? And then just kind of having those conversations. I'm a part of a bunch of communities that where I continuously provide free advice and, and give, feedback. And that's just sort of naturally created this awareness of the brand. And we've driven a lot of business that way, but very, very little as far as like traditional outreach. And we ramp it up slowly, but I mean, it's an expensive proposition.
Interesting. I've got to jump into that because you're probably the only recruiter we've spoken to, Tony, that had such a large majority. Is it 50? I think you said it's 50% from referrals, maybe 50% roughly from thought leadership. Would that be accurate, or maybe a little bit less?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's amazing. That's like unheard of. I haven't heard a recruiter making, billing $1 million and doing 50% of that from referrals. I think it's genius. When I did a post about it that you saw, there's some people that loved it. Other people were kind of pushing back and saying, and I was like, what? How could, I don't know. Recruiters there will always be recruiters out there that find a negative on something amazing, and it always annoys me, but I have to kind of hold my tongue when people.
Well, that's the thing I always tell myself is I'm going to be the recruiter that other recruiters hate.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to shake things up, and like the model is just, the way I look at it is every other industry in 2024 has had to adapt and change. Recruiting seems to be one that hasn't, and we continuously charge 20%, and we do these things. And in certain industries, certain relationships, hey, have at it, right? I'm approaching it from a different direction, and we found success.
Awesome.
Really interesting.
What words of wisdom could you give? Like, is it just as simple as, I'm being a bit naive here when I say this, but is it just as simple as messaging anyone and everyone and saying, hey, if you can refer us to X, Y, and Z, we'll give you this amount of money? Is there any other strategic kind of bits of advice you can give to other people that might want to use a similar strategy?
Yeah. So the way I look at it, so I have my collateral that's created, and then I've got it on an automated, like, outbound campaign. So it's going to people's inboxes. Just say, hey, how I'll let you know. But like literally, I send it to everyone in my network, my candidate pool as well, because they're a great source for referring into business. And so it's just constant front of mind sort of thing. And then just kind of talking out some of the successes, like, hey, this person just made this. If you know somebody who can do that, right? So it's just, become very, very viral for me, and just created this sense of awareness, right? So the way my program works is that I'll pay $1,500 USD to anybody who basically refers me into a business and they become a client, and I'll pay you $1,500 per hire. So not just like flat, but per hire. So it really motivates people to make those introductions. And so, we wrote a check for $6,500 in the beginning of the year to a woman I met on LinkedIn. Wow. Because she introduced me to a company, and they ended up placing 5 hires.
Wow.
Right. Now, I have a couple of rules in place. Is one, I don't offer this program to anybody who's going to refer within their company, because I don't want to create a sense of a bias or whatnot. But if it's more of I've got a friend or a sister or an old coworker who could benefit, let me introduce you. That's great. But if it's like, hey, I'm the product manager at this company, let me introduce you to my boss. I don't want to create that sort of bias, thing. And I give 2 options. I'll either pay you direct, or I'll also write a check to a charity of your choice. And then I'll show you the receipts as well. For some people, like, they don't need the money, and the idea of like, hey, this is a charity that's near and dear to my heart. Love to do it. I love writing checks. And the way I came up with this was I had BDRs before. And the challenge is, what I've seen is that the delta between ramp up time of getting somebody up to speed and the money that you've already spent is getting shorter and shorter. So by the time 60, 90 days of just kind of getting ramped, understanding the industry, understanding the processes, I'm already 3 months invested into spending on this person. And if they don't hit the ground running, I mean, it's a huge sunk cost because you add in benefits, payroll taxes, it's really expensive. So this becomes a pay to play program where the $6,500 I wrote that woman, it's well worth it because that netted me a huge ROI on what I did versus somebody who's working every day and they might net me a few meetings that might not turn in anything, right? But I got to pay them anyway. So, and then I provide everyone with the tax form so that way they can, send it to the IRS and make sure everything's on the up and up. Because I know some people, might be concerned about like the legalities of it, right? But there's a lot of companies out there that I've talked to, and referral programs is sort of becoming the next thing in their outreach channel. That it's not going to replace prospecting, obviously, and I don't think it will ever, but it becomes a relatively low cost way to just multi-thread a channel and just drive business in a different way.
Yeah, it's so
Really
fascinating.
interesting.
So the interesting thing is, I've heard like the referral program isn't new. I've heard of that from many people before and different businesses. But what's interesting about what you said, Tony, is you actually putting a lot of effort into marketing this referral program. Like you're putting a lot of energy, it sounds like, into figuring out the steps, understanding how to communicate it, and then actively communicating it to the right people constantly, even to the point where you're sharing wins. Like this woman managed to get 6.5, you could be the next person. And I feel like you really thought about how you're going to market this. Has that been part of the success, do you think, that you've been doing that consistently?
Yeah, I don't want it to just be something that's on a landing page that just never gets any visibility. But, I also didn't want it to be just like another half measure, right? Well, oh yeah, we got this referral program and nobody knows about it. I'm like, if I put the time in this and we're going to invest capital into this, then let's just try to blow it up and see what happens, right? And if it didn't work, okay, we'll try something else. And eventually this may slow down. And then it's like, okay, what's the next thing that we can do? But for right now, what that's done, it's made my margins really, really sharp because, again, I keep my overhead really, really low on my own internal staffing, and I can just reinvest that money back into the business.
Really interesting. Was there any needle mover with the referral program in terms of you did this and then you were like, oh, wow, this seems to be getting a better response? Was there anything that happened along the way?
So I would say, just a lot of education, because at first, right, we had to refine it a little bit because people thought at first, oh, I can refer you candidates. I'm like, oh, no. Like, finding candidates in 2024 is not the hard part at all, right? So we had to really kind of refine it. And then, what I found is like, hey, I'll even give you the script of what you can give via email of just, you can tweak it to what you feel comfortable with, but just literally it's like, hey, this is Tony with Handle. He places developers from Latin America into startups. Thought you might be able to use them. I'll let you guys have a conversation. And that's all you have to do. And literally that's it. And then you you can walk away and get paid. I don't need anybody to do a lot. So when people realize I don't have to do very much and I can get paid, they're like, what do I have to lose?
Love that.
I
I
love
feel like you
that.
could create a course out of this, Tony, and actually make a separate income just from teaching other recruiters how to
It's brilliant.
create a successful referral program. It's really interesting.
One thing that really, because I feel like it's worth talking about, one thing that really I remember from the comment of the post was, is this ethical? And I was thinking about this, and I was like, I tried to like kind of play out the scenarios, and then I was like, yes, this is if it's a scenario which I thought it was, like you just mentioned, Tony, is that ethical? Like, what's unethical about that? Do you see what I mean? I don't see. They're simply just making an introduction. There's no bias there whatsoever, and you still have to sell yourself and deliver and go through all these hoops to become a partner.
Really what this is just getting past the gatekeepers more than anything else, right?
Exactly.
Like, I've had plenty of these referrals go nowhere. Right. It's just like it didn't line up. It didn't meet, we weren't a good match, and that's okay. Right. But it was the idea is like, this is more of like, if you think about it this way, it's more of a paid booking system. It's just the idea is to get me more meetings, and then I still have, like you said, Ben, I still have to go and close it. So there becomes an unbiased opinion, of the whole thing. And a lot of times too, if I'm not a good fit, I will refer them to other recruiters who I think might help them better. Right. So, and there's a few recruiting agencies who I do know use a similar program. They don't advertise it. It's more of like a landing page, like buried deep on their website. So, there is precedent for this. I've just decided like, I'm going to really kind of blow this up. And I've gotten plenty of people who say, no, not interested. Okay. You move on to the next one. Right. But again, I present candidates, and it's up to the hiring manager in the company to decide, is this somebody that they want to work with? Right. Exactly. So
I don't know why it frustrated me so much. I was just like, but again, this is a typical response from recruiters.
Well, anyway, and let's stick to the positive. When people don't understand something, they get defensive. And that's, again, why I don't offer the program to anybody who would be referring within their business.
Yeah. Makes sense. Do you want to go back a couple steps, Tony? Because you said 50% was referrals and then the other was thought leadership. And I'm guessing that means, just correct me if I'm wrong, creating content on LinkedIn and getting inbound leads or conversation started. Can you give us, is that, let me confirm that, is that kind of what you meant by that?
Yeah. Videos, white paper, just general thought leadership on the industry and whatnot. Yeah.
Cool. I'm sure there are still plenty. I mean, me and Ben speak to them on a weekly basis. There's still plenty of people that don't really know where to start with thought leadership and content. And you've obviously managed to do it quite successfully if 50% of your business is coming from there. Where should people start if you were to give them like a rough structure / rundown of what you're doing that's successful?
Yeah. So, in the beginning, I was like all over the place, just kind of whatever kind of thought popped in my head. I was just like throwing it out there. What I would really suggest is start by becoming really tactical. Pick 3 or 4 subjects or topics that are really important to you, kind of like those major tenets that you believe in, and then just like write them out. And then from there, you can start figuring out, okay, so for me, it's candidate advocacy, right? It's, ethics in the hiring process, right? It's pay transparency, things like that. Once I know, okay, these are the things that are really important to talk about, I start breaking them down of like, okay, what kind of like sub posts can I talk about with these things? And then from there, like I'll have like 20 different things and like, okay, now I'll just start writing about them. And then eventually like I started a blog, then I can break that down in a short form. Then I can create a video, then I can create an infographic, right? So like one post can create 5 other like sub posts on that. And so I think the important thing is like sitting down, creating a content calendar and kind of outlining the things. And then again, I also work in Tony as part of the process as well, right? So usually Fridays, like I'll talk about my journey as a single dad and just like being an entrepreneur and a single dad and just kind of having those like kind of like the highs and the lows. And so I think mixing in thought leadership, brand selling, selling yourself as well, just kind of creates this holistic approach. And then the last thing is like, you have to be consistent, right? So you don't have to post every day, but at least, start with like, hey, I'm going to post once a week and then ramp it up from there. And then the last thing I always say is like, make sure that you're commenting on other people's posts, especially people who you want to interact with, right? Because that's going to create some visibility. So because there's nothing more that's annoying than somebody connects with me on LinkedIn and then like 60 seconds later, they're selling me on Messenger, right? It's like,
it's so I get it.
Yeah, I mean, and I get it. Like, I know when I accept connect, it's coming, right?
I've done it as well. But being on the receiving end of it is frustrating, especially when it's a crap message. It's like, it makes your blood boil like just for a second.
Or they get it wrong and they sell you a completely different product, and it's like, would you like to come get your hair done? Like, I haven't got any hair, man. Come on.
No, and like, what my opening line is like, hey, Sam, thanks for connecting with me on LinkedIn. now I can sell you some shit, like the LOL, right? So I kind of disarm them, right? So they know.
See, that would disarm me. That would make me like at least giggle or be like, okay, it's something different.
Right. And then I'll be like, hey, kidding aside. And then I just kind of provide them more of like, hey, if you ever want to learn more about this, I don't go into like, hey, set a meeting, anything like that. It just becomes more of a, hey, just creating awareness, right? Because a lot of people still don't know the value of selling, working with people from Latin America. So I want, like, it starts with a lot of awareness.
Yeah.
And then we go from there, right? So commenting on other people's posts, create awareness. So then when you finally do message them, they're like, oh, I remember him. He's commented on, and so you have to look at social media as a long game.
Yeah.
Right. And we can't be impatient, or else it's just, you're not going to see the kind of results that you want.
Interesting. I feel like when me and Sam introduced, so we have something called it, and this isn't a plug. This is actually related to what you're saying. So I'll finish it and hopefully you'll understand. We introduced something called a free trial for people. So we basically say, hey guys, try us out for free. And if you like us, then you can buy. Since we've done that, it's been like transformational. Me and Sam have learned so many lessons, and we'd be like, oh my God, let's provide value up front. And then we were like, okay, it's all about the offer. And we knew this, but then having a different offer made such a big difference. I feel like LATAM is the equivalent to that, where you have a unique offer that a lot of recruiters don't really have. Am I right in saying that the offer itself, like saying, hey, I've got access to cheaper talent that are equally as good, is a very attractive offer to the people that you're speaking to?
So it's actually quite a saturated market. If you
really? Okay, interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of nearshoring agencies that are out there.
Okay, interesting. Right? So it doesn't automatically give you a free pass to get.
No, not at all. A couple of years ago, yes, but now I think with globalization, right? It's just like there's more of them out there. I think where our differentiator is, and one of the things I talk about is that, our costs are a lot less than even a lot of our competition. And the reason being is just quite simply, we're not greedy, right? A lot of the big players that I'm not going to name here, but you can look them up, they keep up to 50% of the bill rate for themselves. And I just kind of found that morally offensive. So literally, the way I approach it is like, not only is our costs going to be less than what you're going to see with competitors. So, your average, dev in Brazil, they might charge you $65 and the developer's only keeping 30 of that, right? The way I look at it is like, well, you know what? That's just not right for administrative fees. Instead, I say, okay, we're only $45. And the reason being is we're not undercutting what the developer gets paid. We're undercutting what we get paid because we don't need that much. I only keep 15% of it and pass everything on to the talent. So it's just kind of creating this concept of moral responsibility, geopolitical awareness, and it just kind of helps differentiate me versus the sea of competitors out there. Now, there's other good ones out there. I don't want to disparage the industry or anything like that, but I found that this is what works well for me. The other thing that I really have to call out as well is like, I'm not a development agency. So like, we don't do any development. I am just a staffing agency. So, these guys and gals, they work for you directly. So there is some education that happens. And so that's why I find when I'm doing outreach, a lot of it, we don't go into the pitch right away. It's more about, hey, have you ever been curious about what it would be like to work with LATAM talent? Can I share with you some information? Just 5 tips and best practices. And we keep the conversation going that way, naturally.
Interesting. I know it's saturated, but I'm curious in terms of where your customer, what mindset they're in when you're approaching them. When you're approaching them, have they ever heard of this before? Have they been burnt before? Like, what mindset are they in when you approach them? Typically, when they can, like, for people that typically convert, Tony.
Yeah. So oftentimes they confuse offshoring and nearshoring as the same thing. Offshoring is basically if you live in North America, you're working with talent like, in India, Asia, Africa, offshore, whereas nearshore basically means like Latin America down south, right? So different things, right? So better time zone overlap, different cultural sensibilities. And so oftentimes they feel like the biggest roadblock is that they feel challenged where like, well, I only pay X to work from talent in Brazil, in India versus what you're telling me in Brazil. And it's like, well, they're apples and oranges, right? So we're not as cheap as getting talent in the Philippines or India, but we're not as expensive as talent in the US. We're kind of that sweet spot where I always say we're the sweet spot of talent cost. And it's just like a nice mixture. I always say it's the best bang for your buck, but it requires a lot of education to help them understand it. And so I have to make it as frictionless as possible. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to share with you a bunch of resumes. I'm going to NPC a bunch of resumes. Meet any of them for free. I'm so confident that once you meet them, you're going to love them. You don't like them, we'll walk away as friends. And then I offer a 7-day free trial, right?
You hire a free trial as well. Interesting.
Yeah. 7-day free trial, right? Where if they don't work out, then you don't pay anything.
Brilliant. Wow. So that's a perfect example of what we do as well, which is why it so works so well, because that's brilliant. I mean, again,
sorry, Ben, can I just jump in?
Go ahead.
What kind of, I'm guessing, well, I'll just ask you, what kind of response have you gotten from the free trial? What's their mindset? What kind of happens? You mind talking us through it?
Yeah, so it just basically disarms them to at least say, what do I have to lose, to try somebody out, right? Now, the thing that what I do is that if they don't work out, we will replace them for free. I'm not going to charge, for that 7 days, because what you don't want to happen is they just get free labor for a week. They bring somebody on to complete a project, like, oh, they didn't work out, we're not going to pay for it. We don't want to do that. So it's more a part of like, hey, you sign a contract for certain terms, 3 months, 6 months, whatever the case may be. If this person you hire doesn't work out, I'm not going to charge you. We're just going to replace them out and finish off your term.
Cool. Interesting.
Right. Because there's a lot of exploitation out there. And if I did a bunch of times, I'm going to go broke really quick.
Of course. Yeah. But it's still a very different and interesting concept that you're offering to get people interested. So I think that's clever.
What I'm noticing about you, Tony, is that you're introducing lots of different things. It's not just one, but there's little things and needle moving things like the free trial, like LATAM, like the referral scheme, like the video prospecting that's different, that is trying to maximize your results and do something that other recruiters aren't, which is interesting.
Well, think about it this way, right? We're in the age now where, Gen Z is becoming the entrepreneur that are launching new businesses, and they're thinking of innovative ways of how to go to market for their own customers, right? So I always say, meet your customers where they're at, right? So if I can find ways to create frictionless avenues for them to work with recruiters, I think that aligns with their values as well. And they feel like that it's something that meets what they're looking for versus, when I first start off, these are our terms. It's 25%, take it or leave it, go walk, fly a kite. That was 5 years ago, and it was a different time, right? This is pre-pandemic, economic collapse. We have to change and evolve with the times because our customer base is as well, right? These founders, they're looking for quick, frictionless, low risk because they're trying to do the same thing for their customers.
Really?
And they have an ethical, they believe more, they're more mission driven, and they believe in efficacy in hiring and, and global talent. So presenting that, I think, just aligns better and just creates better partnerships long term.
Really interesting. I just want to go back to something. It just came to my brain now. You said that you are part of quite a few communities, Tony, and then you provide free value. Did I hear that correctly? Do you mind just explaining a bit more about what that entails for anyone that doesn't know what that is, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So I work as an advisor for startups.com. And so they're an accelerator and a community that works with a lot of early stage, first time entrepreneurs in how to get your business off the ground, right? So it's everything from the nuts and bolts of like, how do I, go get funding for my startup? How do I create a pitch deck? How do I do this stuff? And so, as somebody who's, been an entrepreneur for a while, I provide advice around kind of like hiring and team building. And it's just like, again, I go into each time with just like, hey, I'm just consulting. I'm not trying to sell you anything. And it's more of a long game. And again, creating credibility. They might not become my customer, but again, referral program. A lot of these entrepreneurs are broke, and the idea of making $1,500 for referring, it just, again, it's a natural hand in glove fit. And I think if more recruiters join communities and just kind of get their brand out there as a way of helping, I think, again, that just creates credibility, because we know you guys have been doing this for a while. People don't like recruiters. They don't trust us. It's just, it's okay. Like, they hate us until they need us, right? So like, I put a viral post last week that was kind of like a fake text message, where it was like, it's pissed off CTO that said via text, "Don't ever text me again. We don't ever use recruiters." And then 6 months later, he's like, "Hey, I was just laid off. Can you help me?" Right. So the whole idea is like, hey, you don't want a recruiter until you actually need them.
Yeah.
So I think anything we can do to show that recruiters are people too, and that we're actually here to help, the good ones are, I think just creates that trust and credibility. And I think working through community is really good. And so startups.com is a great place. There's tons of recruiters that are there as well. Learning, like, if you're trying to build your recruitment business from the ground up, it's a great place to kind of start.
And in terms of where you found the most kind of value for your business in the communities, has it been that introducing the referral partnership into there? Has it been finding clients there? Like, what has been the knock-on effect of helping people through the communities?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just been more through just the natural referrals of people in their own network. Like, admittedly, a lot of the businesses that are there aren't necessarily at the stage yet where they need to be hiring. They're still solopreneurs and just kind of like pre-revenue. But the whole idea is like, it would bear fruit down the line. And honestly, I just, like, again, my point earlier of just leading a more thoughtful life is I like sharing, and I like giving back, and I like supporting, because I wish I had that when I was building my first businesses. And so I'm like, if you can learn from my mistakes, then please, just take it.
Yeah, I'm getting that as a theme throughout speaking to you for the 45 minutes, is that you actually like sharing. Like, it brings you a lot of joy just sharing and giving value to other people. And sorry, I didn't have to. Sorry, Tony, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, I'm in sales, so I love to hear myself talk, right?
The community thing reminded me of, I have to say this because it was so fascinating. There's this massive YouTuber who does Minecraft videos, but before he blew up, he joined a lot of Minecraft communities online and was speaking in them for like 2 years, giving value, getting to know people. And then when he made these videos, he posted them in the communities, and these communities were half the reason why he managed to blow up. But it was just interesting that was how he did it, like infiltrating communities, being authentic, providing value.
Yeah. I'm all over Reddit. I'm all over Discord, right? And again, just trying to offer value as well. And just the idea, again, is not to sell, but just provide, like, a point of view and just advice. And then that's organically, like, I'll get messages like, "Hey, I have a couple of questions." I'm like, "Well, let's talk off Reddit, like, I can get your information and we can talk, online later." So again, I think just opening up avenues like Facebook groups, Reddit, Discord, things like that really help.
Cool. I've been using Reddit a lot more, and I might have seen you the last couple of weeks.
We might have gotten into a fight on Reddit and not even known it.
Brilliant. Well, we're coming towards the end of the pod, Tony, but I didn't know this. My last question, if that's okay. I have a newfound respect for you. I've respected you anyway, but the fact that you have built this business being a single dad, is it with 3 children?
3, yeah.
3 children.
Yeah.
I'm like, amazing. Well done to you, because that could not be easy. What's it like? What's it been like building a business and supporting children on your own? What's that kind of journey been like?
I mean, it's tough and it's draining, but like, one thing that I've done is I've really tried to involve them in my business, right? So they're 11, 10, and 8. And I think that if they see what dad does all day, like, I help people find jobs. Like, I've got some of them with headsets on that, like, listen to my cold calls. And it's just
that's so cool.
Right. And it's just part of it. It's like, I'm trying to instill, like, hey, entrepreneurship and the idea of, like, hey, creating passive income and whatnot, because I think, the idea of just a single 9-to-5 job is harder to come by. Right. So just teaching them, like, hey, you can create your own path and your own wealth and, and things like that. So I think I always encourage people, who close their home office doors, is bring your kids in once in a while. Let them see what you do. You get more buy-in from them as well.
I love that. What a fantastic way to bring up your kids. And Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a really useful way, and I'm sure your kids will thank you in 10, 15 years time listening to all those cold calls. They'll be able to sell anyone.
Eventually I'm gonna let them like dial for me and just see like who's gonna hang up on a 10-year-old.
How funny if your kids just end up closing all your business for you.
Exactly,
like an 11-year-old,
like. Tony, thank you so much. This was honestly an absolute pleasure to speak to you, get to know you, and so much value in this podcast. So, mate, thank you for joining us, and thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me on. I had a lot of fun.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. Tune in for another episode next week, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Peace and love.